Hello comrades, so today we're going to learn about loops and lists. These are two very simple concepts that you will use all over your programming career or just your hobby, whatever. And I will try to explain it in the most basic way possible. So here's how we declare a list. You can see that there is access modifier, which I use public everywhere right now. Then you have to say that it's a list. And then you have to specify a type of data that this list stores. List is a collection of data. So think of it as int being just one number and list being a set of numbers that you will define. And same for game object. Game object will be one game object and list of game objects will be a set of game objects, like 10 of them or 20 of them, whatever. And another concept is list of lists. So you can have a list and then each element of this list will be another list, which will hold values of type int. We'll get to it a bit later. It's not that scary. So after that, you have a name, numbers, objects in scene, or list of lists, or whatever name you want. And here's an example how you initialize a list immediately after you created it. So you have to say new. Is a keyword that you use to create a new object of type or new structure. And list is this kind of thing. So new list of the same type, then you just open close parentheses and open curly brackets and close it. And between curly brackets, you just write all the data that you want to have in this list. So for example, I want to have in my list 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Use comma to separate the values that you want to add. So you can initialize it like this, but if you make it public, it will be in the scene where you add your object in Unity, and you can just drag stuff in it. So you see that list of game objects, objects in scene is not initialized here. But if you look here, here's objects in scene, and I just dragged all these objects that I created. They're just empty, and it will be filled. And numbers are right now just this. All right, so let's go back to code. And list of lists is kind of the same. Basically, you have to copy the type after you write new, and you have to open parentheses. All right, so let's see what we can do with lists. We can access the first element of the list by doing numbers, which is the name of the list, and then square brackets, and inside you have an index. So here we will debug log, which means print into the console the text first element equal, and then at the end it will append. Appending is an operation where like 1 plus 1 equals 2, but 1 append 1 equals 11. So we basically just add something at the end. All right, so first element equals, and it will add the number as a text here. And in this case, it will be 1. All right, because index 0 is the first element of the list. So it will print 1. Second element, well, technically it will be third element. I don't know why I wrote second. So let's change it to 1. And here, let's change it to 2. So we access the first element, not element 0, element 1, which will be the second, yeah. And it will be 2. It will print 2. Same principle. You can also access the last one. And to do that, you need to know that lists have a count. Basically, count represents how many objects are in the list right now. So for this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we have 5 different elements in the list. So the count will be 5. But the index of the last element is count minus 1, because remember we start with 0. All right, so numbers count 5, minus 1, 4. So numbers at index 4, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 is 5. It will print out 5. And it will also print out 5 when we just try to print numbers count. It will print out 5 because we have 5 numbers. So the things that we can do with lists are amazing. We can remove something at specific index. So remove add 0 will just remove 1 from the list, and the list will be 2, 3, 4, 5. If after that we remove 5, see the difference? It's not remove add, it's not remove at index, it's remove 5, remove specific element. It will remove the first element in the list that actually fits it. So it will remove 5, if it will have another 5 after it, it will remove the first one but leave the second one. So the list will become 2, 3, 4. Then numbers add 5. We'll add 5 to the end of the list. This is how you add stuff to the list. If you don't want to add it to a specific point, you just add it and it will add at the end. But if you want to add it into some specific point in the list, you have to use insert. So I will insert into the index 1 number 0. So it will just go here from left to right until it reaches index 1, add 0, and move everything that is after it to the right. So it will be 2, 0, 3, 4, 5. And another thing that you can do is reverse list. Basically, 2, 0, 3, 4, 5 will become 5, 4, 3, 0, 2. So it will just take it backwards, more or less. All right, here is the basic operations that you can do with lists. You can also do list clear. You can see it here. And what it will do, it will just make the list empty. So instead of having 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you will have nothing. That's also totally legit, and you need it in a lot of cases. All right, we're kind of done with the list. So let's move to loops. There are two main kinds of loops, for and while. Here's for, here's while. And there is for each also, which is a variation of for. But it's a simple one, so let's start with it. So here is how you do the loops. You write, in the case of for each loop, you write for each. Then you have to specify some things for it. First, for each thing where, usually you put some list in it. So for each element of the list objects in scene, it will create a game object, useless object, that you can use inside this loop. And it will iterate through it until we're done with the whole list. So if we have 5 elements in the list, it will run this code 5 times. And in each iteration, useless object will be the next element of the list. So here's how it works. Objects in scene, we have, compilation. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And what it will do, the code, it will change the name of the object to useless object. So all of these objects are in the list. What it will do, it will first use this object, change its name to useless object, then it will go to the next one, this one, change its name to useless object, the next one, the next one, the next one, the next one, until it's done. And on the last one, it will just change its name to useless object, and it will stop the loop, and it will continue the code. All right, so you can do the same with numbers, for example. You can print every number in the list. You will just have to change the type to int here, or you can use a shortcut, which is var. Var is kind of a joker, so if you don't know what type it is, just use var, and C# kind of tries to figure it out for yourself. So if we do var numbers, useless object, and let's call it useless number. We debug log useless number. What it will do, it will just go through numbers after it did all these modifications. So it will be 5, 4, 3, 0, 2, and it will print them in a row. So it will just do print 5, print 4, print 3, print 0, and print 2. Okay, I think that's enough for each. You can try it on your own. I will just move it back to what it was. Yep. All right. Then let's see the next thing. For loop. That's a bit more complicated, but it's also pretty easy. So I hope you will get it from the first time. You can create a loop that will iterate until some specific condition is met. And at the same time, you can define an iterator and you can define the increment for it. So we create iterator I and set it equal to 0. Then, while I is less than objects in scene count, which is I believe 6 or whatever, basically the amount of elements in our objects in scene, yeah, it's 6 from 0 to 5 in our objects to scene list. Then for each object, sorry, not that, then it will increase every iteration. So every time it runs the code, it will increase I by 1. I++ is the same as I equals I plus 1. So it will just increase it by 1. So what it does first, it will just check, it will create a variable. It's equal to 0. Then it will check, is it less than objects in scene count? It is. Then what it will do, it will destroy. Well, I make it destroy. Destroy, what it does, it destroys the component or game object from Unity. It's Unity specific, it's not C# thingy, but you will use it a lot if you do game programming in Unity. Then we will have to specify what we destroy. We destroy object in scene, which is a list, but we access a specific element of it. You remember here we access first element and second element. Here we access the element at index I. So in the first iteration, it will access the element at index 0. In the second one, because I will be increased by 1 at index 1, and it will do it until we reach all the elements, because we do it until we are, we do it while we are lesser with our iterators than the count. Because if we're equal, then it will be out of bounds because we don't have that many elements. But less is the correct thing to use here if you want to get to the end of the array, to the list, end of the list. The problem here is that after we destroy everything, it doesn't automatically empty our list. It just keeps the reference to the same place in memory, let's say, but the things at these places are erased. So it's called null, and it's more or less having nothing. So we want to get rid of this nothing in this list. Nothing is still a thing in this case. And to do that, we do objects in scene clear. So we clear the list, and it will just remove all the elements from it. Like here, it will remove all the digits. In this case, it will remove all the nulls. If we call it before, it will remove all the objects from the list. It won't destroy them if we call it before, because it will be nothing to destroy after we clear the list. The list will have no references. Yep, this is everything about for loop. You can actually change iterator. You can do minus minus, so it will decrease it, for example, every time. Or I equals I plus 2. For example, it will make step of 2 instead of 1. But by default, you usually want to have this. Let's look at our last type of loops, is while loop. This basically executes something inside it as many times as needed until it reaches some specific condition. So here we will try to delete every element from numbers. And we do it by checking in while loop if the number of elements in the numbers list is bigger than 0. If it's bigger than 0, that means that there is some numbers, so we are not finished. Then it will print that number. It will print the number at index 0, so the first one in the list, and it will remove it from the list. And it will just do it until it removes everything. So first it will remove 1, well, we're here. So first remove 5, then 4, then 3, then 0, then 2. This is how simple it is. You can do everything and define any condition. Just make sure that this actually happens at some point, because if not, then your Unity will crash because it will be infinite loop. It will try to iterate through this loop over and over and over, but it will never reach its target. So it will just take all your CPU and Unity will crash. Don't do this. All right, so here's some additional stuff for you. For loops can be nested, so you can have technically as many of them as you want. Remember, we already learned if, so I hope I don't need to explain it again, but I will go through it really quickly. So we have a list, we have an iterator I and iterator j. You want to have them different in different levels of loops, so you can use different iterations. So let's see. I equals 0, I less than 4, I plus plus. So while it is less than 4, it will go through this whole thing, and every time it goes through it, it will increase I by 1. So it will go through it 4 times. Here, the same thing with j, but it will go through it 5 times. Then what we want to do, we want to add j to the list of lists at index I. Here is the result. So basically what we were doing, we have I at 0. Right now there is nothing. Then we will add a list. I will explain this part later, but we will add this list. It will be empty. And 5 times we will add a number which will be 1 unit different from each other. So we start here. This is I. Then j is every single thing. This is I at 0, I at 1, I at 2, and I at 3. This is j at 0, j at 1, j at 2, j at 3, and j at 4. J at 0, j at 1, j at 2, j at 3, j at 4. Yeah, so 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. This is j. So we went through this. Then for each list, basically for each index of the list, we will iterate 5 times through index of a column. And in the beginning, when we start, we check if the count of the lists in this list of lists. Remember, list of lists is list of lists. And it also has a count. Like here we had 5 elements. Here, right now, we have 0 lists inside this list. If the count, which is 0 right now, is less than I plus 1, so it's less than 0 plus 1, then 1, basically, then we add 1 list to it. Empty one, that's fine. We just have to have it, because otherwise, when we try to add to some specific list, which will be at index 0, value j, we can't, because this list doesn't exist until we create it and add it to the list of lists. A bit confusing, but you can also read some comments. I tried to explain it here if you need some more time to actually work on this information. And just one more time, here we check if the count is less than I plus 1, because we will add to I, so the count should be at least I plus 1. Otherwise, it doesn't exist. I doesn't exist. When you have 1 element in the list, the only index available is 0. When you have 2 elements in the list, there are 2 indexes available, 0 and 1. Everything else will be over the list. It doesn't have these elements. All right, so we add j to this list at index 0, because right now, let's say we're in index 0. We'll add 0 from j, then we will go through 4 inner loop, more or less, 4 with j again. We'll add to still 0, 1, then we will add to still 0, 2, 3, and 4. Once we added 4, it is going to add j++, so it will be 5. 5 is not less than 5. It's equal, so it's not less. Then it will just exit this 4, the whole thing, but it will enter this one and increment more or less I++. So index I will be 1, and we'll do the same whole thing, but for this now instead of this. And here is a more simple example of it. I know this is a bit overwhelming, but we have to kind of feel it first before we print it. And what we do here, we print it one by one. So same structure. We iterate first through the list. So first through the rows, and then through the columns. So first we go to the first row, and then we iterate through the columns. Second row, iterate through the columns. Third row, columns. Fourth row, columns. And we just print list of lists I, j. This is how you access specific element in the list of lists. So here, how you access the list int element. And here is how you access this int element in this list. All right, so let's just start the program and see what it prints us. All right. So first element is 3. Let's look at our list. Oh, we cleared it, sorry. But we had some values here. Let's actually set it to 0. So we start with empty list. That's also wrong. That's because I actually did a stupid thing. I tried to initialize the list here, and then I edited value in the editor. This was stupid because editor more or less overrides everything. So what I will do, I will just add manually here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because it's not always that you are actually editing stuff in editor. Sometimes you want to edit stuff in code, and this is when it gets useful, when you initialize like this. But right now it doesn't matter because it will be overwritten by whatever is actually here. And let's start again. All right, so we have first element 1, it was 1, then second element 2, the last element was 5, and there were 5 elements in the list. So let's see what we print next. We are done with this. And where are our debug logs? Okay, so we print all the numbers after all these modifications. So there should be 54302 and 54302. And then, if you remember, we print the whole list of lists, which should be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 times. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so you learned how to make lists, how to make loops for each, for, and while. I hope you enjoyed this lesson. Don't forget to subscribe. For more lessons, I will try to explain everything that I can in the most basic way for you. I know the programming might be hard, but once you get rid of like some basic barriers, then it will get easier. So see you in the next video.